The following program is rated PG and may contain mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
The Super Channel Heart and Home After Show with special guests Chris McNally, Amanda Wong, Barbara Gregusova, Sarah Maberly, and now the host of the Super Channel Heart and Home After Show, Elliott Wallach.
Welcome to the Super Channel Heart and Home After Show. What a great program. You just watched episode 10 of season 10. There's just 2 episodes to go, and it's the end of the season. It goes by so fast. Our first guest today is Chris McNally, breaking down the trouble in Hope Valley. Everybody's coming together. Let's take a look.
You're the one saving the town. Just doing what I can. But I need all the help I can get. You got me.
Unfortunately, Elizabeth and I already have a long list of items for tonight.
Well, I'm game. Great. Wish us luck.
Godspeed.
Why do you think Lucas takes such an interest in protecting the town?
Well, I think that Hope Valley is what he considers to be home now. And he spent a long time traveling through various cities, staying different places, and always on the move. And this is the town that he feels rooted and connected to. And so it's sort of a part of his identity. And if it's threatened, he'll do what he can to protect it.
Divert half the water. At least until after the election. That'll give me time to show the people that there's a functional compromise and keep their votes in your favor. I can be your point person here in Hope Valley. For a fee, of course.
Serious men.
He's convinced them that he's going to be on their side. Then he's a shrewd businessman. Would you define him that way, that he can kind of play both sides?
Yeah, I think Lucas can be manipulative, and that's part of his business tactics and the way that he reads people and spins optics, for sure. But always with a good intention.
Why do you think he can swim sort of in the big city pool, but then also in the small city?
He spent time in San Francisco and New Orleans and over in Europe, and so big cities are familiar to him. And so I think he's comfortable there, but then also finds a home here and knows the people of Hope Valley well, and so I think he's just well-versed in both large and small towns.
Are you a big city guy or more of a small town kind of guy?
I wouldn't like small towns, but somewhere in the middle. You know, New York is exciting, but I don't know that I want to live there. A couple of years might be nice. Yeah, like something a little more accessible, not quite so daunting, but it's always fun to visit. But then I'd also go crazy if I lived in a town that was a couple hundred people or a few thousand.
Right, like Hope Valley. Be a little too small.
Hope Valley's a little tiny, yeah. I think it's bigger on the show, though. Our version of Hope Valley is smaller. We only have 2 row houses, but then on the show there's there's tons. There's people all over the place.
Yeah, movie magic. Are there any other places like that on the set where they do that, make something seem bigger? I can think of a couple actually, like an upstairs, for instance. Is there an upstairs? Yes. Is there an upstairs in the saloon?
There's an upstairs in the saloon. Yeah, there's no rooms in it or anything.
In the show, we get to see your office. Now, that appears to be behind a curtain that's the back of the saloon.
Right.
Is it actually behind a curtain in the back of the saloon?
Maybe not.
Come on, we want the dirt.
My office is in the dentist's office.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you see the dentist's office in town, that's the interior or the exterior of Lucas's actual office.
Okay.
But technically, it should be through that curtain and in the back of the saloon.
Okay.
But no, that curtain leads to like a little Harry Potter under the stairs cupboard that we all cram into. If you see a bunch of people going through that curtain, we're all hanging like this.
You all have to stack up back there till they all cut.
Yeah.
We get to see a scene in this episode where Lucas really steps up. Let's take a look at that clip.
Okay.
Now, unlike Governor Balfour, I don't believe the greater good means leaving people out. I don't believe the greater good means decimating towns, valleys, lives, communities that we have worked hard to build here. Now, we have an election coming up, and if you agree with what I've said, go out and make your voices heard.
Here, here.
As an actor, can you tell when you're hitting the sweet spot? Because I feel like that performance was just the sweet spot.
I think you can tell when things go bad.
Right.
When it doesn't feel right, or you're not actively getting what your intention is, or what your character is after. There might be times where you feel after the fact like maybe you were in the right pocket, but it's this weird kind of like alternate universe that you're in while you're doing it. So it is difficult to think about whether you're in a sweet spot while you're involved, because if you're thinking about the sweet spot, then you're not you're not engaged properly. So I was trying to just focus on my intention and what I need, and on basic things like that. What happens if you don't get what you need, and then play around, and the freedom that once you made those decisions, the freedom that you can find. If it goes horribly wrong, then you know, and if it didn't feel horrible, then hopefully it was okay.
How do you prepare for a scene like that? What's your process?
I've kind of dabbled in a lot of different methods, but I think one thing that stuck with me is one aspect of the Meisner technique, which is you learn all of your dialogue without any grammar or inflection. So you'd talk like a complete monotone robot, and be able to run through your dialogue as a robot quickly with no emotion or anything attached to it. It's just sort of ingrained. And once you're able to do that, then you know those words are in your body, and then you can actively search for what you need and apply different tactics to get what you need. And you're never catching yourself wondering or forgetting what your next line is, although I do that. It happens. But I would say being able to be off book in that monotone robot fashion, and then I need to know what I need and how I'm going to get it, and you can start layering on from that. You know, what kind of character are you playing? Where do they hold their energy? Are they inspired by any kind of animal? Just fun stuff like that. And then, I mean, you can do, the list goes on with, depending on how much time you have and how complex your character is. That's the basics.
Did you say animal?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Inspired by an animal?
Yeah, so your physicality will be inspired by an animal that you adopt. You know, an easy one would be a cat. You know, if someone's cat-like, or if they're kind of like dopey, I'm just a golden retriever, you know? Yeah, just things to help sort of carve out a character.
So what animal for that scene?
I can't tell you, that's a secret.
What's a secret?
Lucas's animal is my secret.
Yeah. I don't think it was a cat.
Yeah, I'm not a cat.
Yeah,
Lucas isn't a cat.
No, because I feel like that scene was really powerful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Is it like public speaking in the sense, do you get nervous? I mean, you're not yourself. I mean, you're your character, but do you get, if a bunch of people are watching you, does it change how you feel?
And then you can definitely tell whether you authentically knew all of your dialogue off, monotone, no inflection, or if you didn't, because as soon as you start adding people's eyes on you, or if you start adding business, working with props and actions and activities, then all of a sudden your words just escape. So yeah, that's why I have to make sure that I really
that you know.
Drill it in.
Yeah. And in this episode, when he gets all this media attention from the speech, it feels like Elizabeth maybe she's not sure where she fits in. How do you think she's feeling about that?
I think she's jealous.
Maybe jealous. Or maybe she's, you guys are you're planning a wedding.
Yeah.
And you sort of start to see how these life events are starting to interfere with what they have going on.
I ever feel like life is a giant ball and it's rolling, and then sometimes it starts rolling faster than you can keep up. I think it's a situation like that.
Yeah.
Where things are sort of spiraling and no one's sure what's going to happen or where it's going to lead, and they're just trying to take one day and one step at a time.
Yeah, and figure out how to save the town because the stakes are high, right? They're really high.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to see how it plays out, find out what happens. Hopefully you'll join me for another episode.
Yeah, totally.
All right, thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
Stakes are high, but they're also high for Hickam. He's trying to find love, trying to find a date to the ball, but he got shut down by Mei Su. Amanda Wong's with Tiffany to break that down, and then she also interviews Barbara Gregosova to talk about all the beautiful dresses in that ball. Everybody looked so great. All the dresses were different. How does she do it? Let's take a look.
One of the things that is happening that we know in this episode is the connection between Mike and May. What do you think about the possibility of that becoming a relationship?
Ooh, okay. So Mike has been the bachelor in town for a while.
Yeah.
May is new. And as you saw with May and Nathan, she really brought out a confidence in him. And maybe May could do the same for Mike. There's always been a little bit of trepidation and things like that. But you see it still happening now. You know, even when it came to asking May to the governor's ball.
Yeah.
You know, Mike was a little bit nervous about it, and someone, you know, swooped right
That's
in
right.
and got the girl.
Yep.
And so I think it would take one or both of them feeling a little more assertive in this situation. And May is not, you know, not. She's pretty forthcoming and she's pretty honest and she goes for what she wants, and it's indicative of her career and also her interactions with Nathan. But I think that there's also been an element of like being led too. You know, there's been a little bit of back and forth reciprocity, and so I think that maybe she needs that from Hickam as well in order for a relationship between the two of them to flourish.
How has it been working with Ben?
Wonderful. He's very, very kind and nice and welcoming and warm. He was the first person to introduce himself to me when I got on set, and he really made an effort to make me feel welcome and introduce me to everybody. He's just a nice, all-around, wonderful human being.
Well, we have a clip where you're talking to the girls about sort of what's happening between you and Mike in the episode.
Okay.
Let's take a look.
Why don't we all go together as a group? Seeing as none of us have dates. Unless you were hoping.
For Mike? No. I mean, I don't know.
Sometimes men need a hint. I have an idea. Have a seat. You're next.
Okay, that led into something kind of big.
Yeah, it
Right?
did.
The big reveal. So tell me about the bangs.
The bangs. They were definitely.
Okay, were they real or not real?
Okay, they weren't. They were
They were
a hair
not.
piece. Yeah.
Okay.
So
You didn't have to fully commit.
no, I didn't have to commit to the hair, but it was a cool storyline choice though.
Yeah.
And it really did make a huge difference, and just even the way that I looked, and even in the way that I acted, which is super interesting.
did?
Yeah, I think so.
How come? Like what about it?
I think just in terms of like communicating and emoting, I was like trying to convey my emotions more strongly, because if you have no access to your eyebrows, you only can
Interesting. Yeah,
open your eyes.
they were kind of long.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
But and also, you know, when people get a new haircut and they're not really sure how people are going to receive it, there's a few of these things you touched a little bit more, and so that also played into the performance, and it was fun to play with. For this season, because May's bangs have grown out, we actually just cut my real hair, and so now we have them like at this length, which is where it would be after 5 months of growth.
Yeah, and those are not quite as heavy.
Yes. They're a
Yeah,
little
those were some heavy bangs.
they were heavy bangs, yeah. But hey,
But you pulled it off.
thank you.
Yeah,
You
You could look, you look good no matter what
Thank
you
you.
do.
Thank you, Tiffany.
So in that clip where she's talking about Mike and how she's feeling, do you think she's starting to feel a little bit of a connection with him, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. But, you know, sometimes even in modern day, we have the gray area. Or you don't know where you stand with somebody and you want them just to tell you, and like, do we like each other? Do we not like each other? I think she's feeling that. And that's a really scary place to be, especially with her, you know, previous relationships or her past history with men. There's Jeffrey, who...
Right, that guy.
Yeah, followed her around, forged a marriage license, kind of tormented her a little bit, and forced her to go to jail, and you know, threatened her.
Yeah, he wasn't nice.
No. The actor, though, is very kind.
Oh, is he? Okay, good.
Yeah. But there's all that, you know, and then there's the unfortunate, like, the falling through of the thing with Nathan.
Yeah.
And so I think she's felt a little like unlucky in love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We mentioned it already, but at the ball, he misses his chance to ask May to dance because he just can't get his act together quick enough. So she dances with Harry.
Yes.
But the ladies are not going to let that stand.
No, they're definitely meddling on the side, watching, you know, prompting.
Yeah.
That's why they even bring him and like, hey, it's him.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's a little too late now.
Those
though,
are good
guys.
friends.
They are.
Yeah.
In real life too.
I have a clip. Let's take a look at it.
Okay.
Why Why don't you two dance?
May's just grabbing a drink. I don't think...
She won't mind.
Hi, May. You look beautiful tonight.
Thank you, Mike. You look great too.
Would you care to dance with me?
Pardon me?
Would you care to dance with me?
I would, but why not?
His reaction. I love how when he comes up to you and he's too loud.
Yeah.
So he tries to correct.
Yeah. And then you can't hear him.
It's too soft.
Yeah.
He does such a good job just as a physical actor.
Totally.
Yeah, I was noticing in some of his other scenes that he's not even saying any words, but he's saying so much. How is it playing across someone like that?
It's just laughs all the time. He manages to make it different every single time he does it, and it's always hilarious. You never get tired of watching him in a scene. You also don't get tired of just spending time with the guy too. He's just like a kind soul who exudes warmth, and you can see it a little bit in Hickam too. Just like a warm, kind human being.
I should have asked her.
Yes, you should have. And it's not like you didn't have help.
Was that... You put us together, the choir.
Tell me about those dresses, because you had to get a dress for every main female cast member, am I correct?
Yes.
So how did you do that?
I think if I remember correctly, Florence ended up in Rosemary's bridesmaid dress from Clara's wedding. Then Fiona had her dress, which she wore to Clara's wedding. Then May wore Elizabeth's dress, which Elizabeth wore to Clara's wedding.
Thank goodness you got to repurpose it, because you put all that work in that earlier episode. Now you get to use it again in season 10. What about some of the other dresses? Because there were some really beautiful dresses. Have we seen those before?
Elizabeth was built from scratch.
It was, okay.
So, so that one, it was also funny because I bought these other fabrics. And I was like, oh, like, we can use this one. And Erin liked it. And then I'm like, thinking about it, I'm like, this is not right, because it will be like everybody in a room. And it's not really like, she will not stand out, right? So I was just like, she needs something more special.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that fabric is not going to work. And luckily, at the end, again, I went to our stock. And we had just enough of the fabric, which ended up on Elizabeth's dress. And it was the beaded one.
Yeah.
And then I put white underneath.
It's beautiful.
But there was just enough.
Was that one of your favorite pieces for the season, or what would be your favorite piece?
It's hard to say, because all of the pieces which we build are very special and they're very different. Like the swim barrier is different from, Elizabeth's ball gown dress. It's different from the wedding dress.
Not quite a mermaid.
More like a giant puffball.
Drowning in whipped cream.
This doesn't feel like me at all.
Tell me how you came up with that design, and did you build it or repurpose something?
We tried on some like dresses we already had, like the wedding dresses on Erin. And
wedding dresses that other actors?
No.
Okay.
Like, which we just had randomly around.
Okay, that you just had in your stash of wardrobe
so we tried
dresses.
like a few dresses, and then I was looking at like which ones I can basically chop up, right? So there was this one dress which had basically, it had a thin straps, like very thin spaghetti straps, and it had beautiful beaded detail, which basically you can see because we didn't really do much to it. And then it had a skirt, and I think the skirt was like one layer, and it was like poofy, like big. So what we did was we basically had to chop up all the layers into the skirt to have the sides with the layers on it.
Oh, right.
And then usually on these dresses doing 920, the flat was front as well as the back. So you only had the front on a side.
It was flat in the front?
Yeah, like straight front was flat, and the fan was on a side. So we had to basically remove all the fabric in front which wasn't supposed to be there. Yeah, it was quite a reconstruction process. And then the neckline we changed. The same fabric we used on the front and the back of the dress, we actually used for like this little, let's call it a yoke right now, like for the neckline and the little sleeves, and we added the bows.
The bows.
It came first through my hands because I do the fittings, but then somebody had to alter it or, reconstruct it. So, and we are a very, really small team.
I was just going to ask you, how big is your team? How many people are working with you?
Set supervisor is on set to take the continuity, take care of the continuity. Then we have two track ladies.
And this is specifically wardrobe?
Yeah, specifically wardrobe. Then we have one background person, and those are people who basically are on set, right? So they are not helping with building
anything. They're just the day of, they're making sure everything's working.
Full time. Okay. And then we have me, my dad, who can sew sometimes, but he doesn't. He just usually rips things apart. Then my mom usually does all the the most delicate cutting. Or cutting and reconstruction, anything which I know that somebody else could ruin, maybe possibly. Yeah. She gets it.
Was she involved with the character of Madeline St. James?
She was building that stuff.
She did, because that was a new character in season 10. What was the direction you were given for her wardrobe?
I mean, we are in 1920, so we knew she has to be more 1920s.
Yeah.
Inspired, for the wardrobe, so as modern as possible.
And a little bit more city. She felt a little,
Yeah, and then I basically researched pictures from 1920. She ended up basically in striped fabrics.
Yeah, she looked great though, and the hat. I like the hat.
Yeah,
looks really good.
It's kind of nice when things come together. Actually, we didn't even have to change the bows, I think, because one came with red and one came with the blue.
Yeah,
all her wardrobe was built.
Okay.
Oh, and actually, the dress she's wearing, the red one with the stripe, I actually found a modern dress in a store, which we actually tried on her, but it was white, and it had a nice drape, and it had a different neckline. So I was inspired by the drape of the dress I found.
Yeah,
and then. We basically made my version of that dress for her in that fabric.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to me again and go over it, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk again.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Next up, the amazingly talented Sarah Maberly. How does she do it? She made a hotel in Buxton out of one of the set buildings for Hope Valley. She's incredible. Tiffany's on the set to talk about it. Let's take a look.
Sarah, thanks for joining me again on the after show.
It's great to be back.
In episode 10, we got to see the Hotel Buxton. Where did you build that set?
That was in the school.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay, how'd you pull it off?
It was fun because we haven't really seen, to my recollection, elevators. And so we got to put in, we got to put in the elevator. So we went, again, a little modern because we're in the city, we're in the 20s. What would they have? Elevators. So that was a lot of fun. I was like, can we make it practical? No, we can't. Okay, fine.
You mean, well, obviously can't bring in an elevator, but to make the doors open. Right, but then you have to build the inside and...
Yeah, which I've done that before. So I was like, I'm ready for this. We can do this. But I was happy with just being able to do that. But that's also fun because then you get to go vintage shopping for all of that old hardware.
Yeah.
And so that,
How did you build it out? Was it just a box, a facade?
It was just a facade. So, we built, construction built a wall flat that went up to beyond 10 feet. And then wallpaper and trim. And then just the little touches on the outside that would suggest it's an elevator.
And you said you went and sourced the hardware and get all those details. And were those modern pieces that you actually, or you had to paint something?
They're true vintage.
They are?
Yeah, they're genuine vintage. We have a couple of our sources who, we knew, all right, we're gonna go there. And then we painted everything, and then we put, you put plywood up because we wanted to, of course, hide certain details that really give it away as the school. And give it that floral pretty touch, which was something that our showrunner really had hoped for, that kind of garden pretty feel. Because you can go to the big city, you can expect dark and grand.
Yeah.
You can really get that dark wood. So she wanted something completely different. And so
it was bright. I remember thinking, oh, this is bright. I felt like there was a lot of white in it.
Yeah, which is also something that, it doesn't often happen here. We don't, we go lighter, but white is definitely not something. Plus, it would just get way too dirty out in Hope Valley.
Sure.
You couldn't keep that up. But in Buxton, they can handle it.
You said you put up plywood, so you don't want to destroy what's be the schoolhouse because you're going to have to use it again. So how do you put that up without destroying what is already there?
Well, it's skin ply. We just skin ply everything. And you do, we create some holes, but then luckily our art department or our painter goes in and they remud it and, restain it and repaint it. Any little thing that gets a little nicked, which is bound to happen, but to preserve it, the color and the amount of work that it would take repainting and painting back and then going back forth is a lot. So by just using skin ply and putting the treatment on skin ply, at least we can take it off and there's minimal changeover to get it back to where it needs to be. So you literally just put, a facade up to create a look.
So speaking of different, you had to do a ball in the saloon again, which we've just seen that a few times. So what was your approach this time?
You use the word ball. We're going big on this one, and it's a really weird small detail, but we always see do our swagging like this, our fabric swagging. So I was like, okay, hear me out. Can we go up and down? Can we hang drapes down? And they're like, yes, let's. So that was kind of our basis.
Good idea.
And then just thinking glam and Rosemary being who Rosemary is. I'm like, okay, well, what would she do? This is up her alley. And we went, okay, we're going to go full on 1920s Great Gatsby. And so we brought in the golds and then we brought in those clamshells, which I'm not really sure how much we saw those, but I knew they were there. And there's little clamshells below those drapes shooting light up. Oh. You also have to be prepared because we do a lot of overhead decorating, but then you got to watch out for, our lights and our booms and everything. So you have to be able to rig all of that to come up and down really quickly. And we use our chandeliers a lot because those can get pulled in and pulled out, and they're always moving. They're never in the same spot. If you really want to look at details, watch the movement.
That's a good little tidbit
of those, because depending on the shot, they lower them to camera. And again, I feel like it was something that we hadn't seen, which is always the goal. You don't want to regurgitate, but it is also Hope Valley, and so they'd be using what they had around.
That's right,
and that is something that we did because there's so many parties within the saloon, and we've kind of created these colors that we'll see often there. And so green and gold fabric kind of comes in and out of the saloon a lot, whether it's interior or exterior. And so we go, okay, well, this is what Lucas has in the back room, and this,
so we'll implement
in the storage shed. So that's always fun too, is using the materials that we may have already seen, but then reinventing it and trying to do that too. Is a lot of fun because that's what they would do.
Well, I appreciate you coming back on the show
anytime.
And talking to us. I love hearing about all the details that go into it, and I'm sure the fans do too. And we appreciate how much work you put into it and how much care you put into it. Thanks for talking to us about it.
Anytime. Got lots to say.
All right. Well, next season 11.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you.
And that concludes our program. Thanks for joining us on episode 10 of the Super Channel Heart and Home After Show.